And in this action plan, they refer several times to not only COVID-19, but now they slip in influenza. Then, of course, they go on with the gaslighting, labeling vaccine hesitancy, this is what they call it, as anti-Western and anti-EU. The vulnerable group among those who should be given priority to take this update vaccine are pregnant women. Yes, okay, so good morning, everyone. Thank you for coming. We're pleased to hold another press conference today because of the events unfolding after the committee session of last Monday, when our colleague, who I hope will still be able to join us this morning, asked Pfizer a question, and the answer was really what made the news. Put in a nutshell, the cat is out of the bag. It was a gigantic lie, what they told us, that these vaccines would prevent you catching this virus or would prevent transmission. Well, none of that was true, as it turns out, and based on that lie, all of the mandates, all of the lockdowns, all of the non-pharmaceutical measures as wearing masks, staying at home, curfews, all of that was based on that gigantic lie. And yet, they will not acknowledge it. No, they just go ahead with whatever they want to do with us. I would like to point out a couple of things from the EU Commission's action plan, EU response to COVID-19, preparing for autumn-winter 2023. As you might have guessed, the focus, of course, is still on these hazardous mRNA injections. Well, that's not surprising here. They would like to implement and coordinate effective communication initiatives and strategies to promote uptake of additional injections and complete the primary series of those who have not even begun yet, the unvaccinated. So once again, a particular group of a population is being targeted, and that's what they're trying to do. They would like to increase vaccine confidence by debunking mis- and disinformation. Well, who is spreading the mis- and the disinformation? It is EU Commission, it is the pharmaceutical companies, it is governments, especially in the Western democracies. They are the ones spreading the mis- and the disinformation. They are the ones telling people lies. For what? So that pharmaceutical companies make profits and profits and profits. And the risks? Well, guess what? You, the taxpayers, you will be left with the risks. And then, of course, they want to target, and they specifically say that, target hard-to-reach population groups. Well, I guess in that instance, they are actually talking about me. Yes, I am a hard-to-target, a hard-to-reach population group because I saw through their lies from the get-go. I'm still unvaccinated, and I will remain unvaccinated. I will not inject a poisonous substance into my body, point blank. So go ahead and try to target me. Good luck with that. Then, of course, they go on with the gaslighting, labeling vaccine hesitancy, this is what they call it, as anti-Western and anti-EU. Can you believe this? So anyone who is not willing to let themselves be injected with this vaccine is anti-Western and anti-EU. No, ladies and gentlemen, let's be clear about this. If you do not want to poison your body, and it is your choice to do with your body whatever you please. Remember, my body, my choice? That's their narrative, actually. Remember that. So, if you do not want to take that vaccine, that has nothing to do with being anti-Western or anti-EU. It is pro-people. That's what it is. and it is anti-globalist elites. That's what it is. And in this action plan, they refer several times to not only COVID-19, but now they slip in influenza. So this will be the next step for their measures, whether it be vaccinations or non-pharmaceutical interventions like wearing masks or staying at home curfews. Then they will be able to do so when there is an influenza pandemic or wave. And whenever I think they could not possibly come up with yet another atrocity to inflict on people, they sure as heck prove me wrong. The EU Commission proposes now the prioritized administration of the update injection for the vulnerable groups, and then they list who these vulnerable groups are. And they start by saying people aged 60 years and older, individuals with underlying conditions. No problem there. But then they list another group. And you really need to brace yourselves for that one. The vulnerable group among those who should be given priority to take this update vaccine are pregnant women. I have never heard anything more despicable than that, because the point is this: they do not know what this vaccine does to the unborn child. They simply have no clue. And yet, now they're pushing it on pregnant people. And keep in mind, there has been a drop in birth rate. We don't know why that happened. You would expect the opposite of that. I mean, people were locked down. Remember what happened when they had a blackout in New York in the 70s? 9 months later, they were like babies left and right. But not this time. People were locked up for months in their homes. Nothing. Drop in birth rate? Interesting question. And these are the questions that we should be asking. So just to give you an update on that, they will continue to try, they will continue to push whatever their end goal is. They are trying to. And yeah, I would just like to thank you for supporting us and for letting us know that we indeed are advocating and fighting for what you, the people, want. These globalists and their puppets are but a few people with no regard for you, for the people. We, on the other hand, are many, because we are the people. And we will continue to fight for you, for your rights, for freedom, democracy, and the rule of law. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Christine. Francesca?
Thank you very much, Christian. Well, we are here today to update the international press about the new facts that are important to be aware of to understand what's going on in European institutions and not only among people. I recently found out that an international company named Orgenesis, an American biotechnological company, which has played a leading role in the creation of gene therapy vaccines, mRNA ones, mainly produced by Pfizer and Moderna. In this company, the husband of the president of the European Commission, Ursula von der Leyen, Heiko von der Leyen, operates in a managerial role. Moreover, Orgenesis carves out a leading role in a project led by the Italian University of Padua, where a new research center for the development of gene therapy and drugs with RNA technology has won 320 million euros of Italian recovery funds for research and innovation. Orgenesis has placed its own medical director on the supervisory board of the Paduan Foundation, that is just Heiko von der Leyen, the husband of the president of the European Commission. The whole project seems just to be tailor-made to finance the research work of the multinational pharmaceutical companies that during the COVID-19 pandemic earned about $1,000 per second by the sale of RNA vaccines. In fact, among the participants, we find many big names in the pharmaceutical sector, as Pfizer, AstraZeneca, BioNTech, Sanofi, and more. And in Greece, too, the same company where von der Leyen's husband has a directive role has obtained 2 years ago large sums by public funds to finance its research on mRNA treatments. I think that after the slew of scandals that are coming to light, starting with the revelation in COVID committee by Pfizer's representative about the common system of off-records negotiations between multinationals and the EU Commission, in blatant and repeated violation of European rules on transparency, to the never-declared conflict of interests of President von der Leyen, whose husband sits in the board of a company that has enormously benefited from the European regulations proposed by the Commission she presides over, ending with the inclusion of the President's husband in the board that manages a foundation created ad hoc to intercept large sums from European recovery funds. I think that it's time that EU citizens have the right to know the truth. I wrote a letter to the chair of COVID committee asking her to invite President von der Leyen to a hearing in front of the Parliament representatives to provide to us the necessary answers and clarifications about these serious issues. I hope that she will answer to me in a positive way, even if I didn't receive any answer yet. But lately, we read the news about the European Public Procurement Office investigating about the EU's procurement of COVID vaccines to face the pandemic. This fact, the only existence of this investigation, casts concerning shadows upon the image of the whole European Commission and on all of EU institutions. In light of all this, I think that the time has come for Ursula von der Leyen to resign from her post and eventually respond to the request for clarification that will be placed on her by the European Parliament in the first place and by the competent judicial authorities then. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Francesca. Ivan?
Thank you very much, dear colleagues, for your introduction speeches. Did Pfizer falsely advertise their product or products or no? Well, we now know that the answer is yes. They did falsely advertise their product. And it wouldn't be the first scandal Pfizer was found. I will remind you, as I stated on COVID committee, 10 years ago, Pfizer was fined in Croatia $60 million for bribing Croatian doctors. Also, they paid more than $2 billion for false advertising before. And there are also many other cases. So, let's go back to the point. How do we know that the vaccines do not prevent transmission? We know since October or November 2021, when there was a big paper published in the Lancet, which stated that there is no statistically relevant difference between the vaccinated and unvaccinated in spreading the disease. We are not really scientists, but now we know. We know since October or November 2021. The question is, how long or when did they start to know that? And as far as we know, they knew it from the beginning. On Monday 10th, 2022, at COVID committee in European Parliament, representative of Pfizer, answering to a question of our colleague Ross, admitted that their vaccine was never tested for transmission. It was not even an endpoint of the trials. In the following days, even the so-called fact-checkers confirmed this, cynically stating that this is nothing new. When it comes to the Commission, it is similar. Representative of the Commission, Mr. Wolfgang Philipp from DG HERA, said on October 13th 2022, at the following COVID committee, I quote, "If you want to have a vaccine that prevents transmission, we could have got it. But it's not there yet. There is work going on in this direction, but it is a completely different design of these vaccines." End of quote. This piece of information, stated by Mr. Wolfgang Philipp, simply confirms that from the very beginning, from the second part of 2020, so 2 years ago, they knew that the products that are being developed will have nothing to do with transmission prevention. Nonetheless, it didn't prevent them from implementing digital green certificates. When it comes to EPPO, European Public Prosecutor's Office, a few days ago, following our actions in COVID committee, European Public Prosecutor's Office decided to conduct an investigation regarding vaccine procurement. This is a step in the right direction. However, the issues with all of this go far beyond the procurement. So what we know now is that Pfizer lied. It can be seen from many statements of Mr. Borla that Pfizer vaccines were presented and promoted as a product that prevents transmission. For example, back on September 8, 2020, Mr. Borla sent a message to those who were skeptical about their product, those who have no intention of being vaccinated. So I quote, "At the end of the day, it is their judgment, but will affect the lives of others, because if they don't vaccinate, they would become the weak link, and that would allow this virus to replicate." End of quote. Also, he later stated that, I quote, "A lot of indications right now that are telling us that there is a protection against transmission of the disease." End of quote. And there are many other examples that before the introduction of vaccine, during the introduction of vaccines, and shortly after, Mr. Borla and the others were presenting their product falsely, that this product has some features which were later proven to be untrue. And they knew it from the beginning that it doesn't have such features. Now we have confirmation from them and also from the Commission. So the governments use these lies, these fake news, to implement digital green certificate and to take our rights away. This is a disaster, and they need to be held accountable. Thank you.
Thank you, Ivan. Stasis?
Yes, thank you, Christian. Thank you, everyone who is listening to us, and congratulations on a good job on COVID committee. Unfortunately, I wasn't allowed to be a member of that, even though I tried to analyze this thing and still try to do my job. But I'll go back to February press conference here in Strasbourg, where I asked for Ursula von der Leyen to resign. Because of her conflicts of interest, husband was mentioned here, he works or consults with another company, pharmaceutical company in Germany. Because of her non-transparent, let's call it this way, communication, we all know about that SMS messages, which suddenly disappeared. And open cooperation, even not collusion, open cooperation with Pfizer on social networks on what we know is now vaccine propaganda or disinformation and misinformation. Now, I was wearing the same T-shirt, and you can recognize, while it's a little bit of art, this is Ursula von der Leyen. There is another person on this T-shirt, who I will be talking about now. This is Bill Gates, Mr. Bill Gates. Now, so a coincidence, but the same month, in February, the research, massive research started by Politico and another publication, Die Welt, on the role Bill Gates and his organization has several of them, including philanthropy, but also vaccine and research organizations, which he initiated, seed funded, and then attracts funding from other sources, including governments, about his and his organization's role in COVID story. This research took 7 months. It included 50 or so officials from the EU and the USA. They were interviewed. Most of them didn't disclose their names. You could ask the question, why in the world they don't want to disclose their names during these free and democratic times. Now, the report was published 5 weeks ago on September 14, and the title reads, and I quote, "How Bill Gates and partners used their clout to control the global COVID response with little oversight." Now, some more specific takeaways from this research and this report, and I quote, "The organization's leaders had unprecedented access to the highest levels of governance, spending at least $8.3 million to lobby lawmakers and officials in the US and Europe." End of quote. Second takeaway, officials from the US and the EU and representatives from WHO rotated through these organizations as employees, helping them solidify their political and financial connections in Washington and Brussels. Now, have anyone seen this report covered, discussed in any other media? I did not. Even though I researched that, I looked for that specifically. The question is, why? I think it's important news. Research took 7 months, interviews 50 people, high-level officials. Now, the answer probably lies in another research, which resulted in finding out that Bill Gates, with his foundations, helps financially many media outlets in the West, including such as CNN and BBC. Now, on BBC, I follow it sometimes, even though I don't trust on some subjects, including COVID. He proclaimed himself as being a medical expert. Now, I think it's a lie. Because he pays BBC, he can claim whatever he wants, and no one is questioning them because he finances these media outlets. Now, some other quotes from this political report, and I would recommend anyone to read it. I start the quote. "We have struggled to gain access to the documents and correspondence that would have made it possible to scrutinize how decision-making processes have actually happened and to establish whether they have been subject to democratic control." End of quote. Sounds familiar from Ursula von der Leyen communication with Pfizer, doesn't it? Another quote from the senior official in the US, who is anonymous. "They have very, very powerful influence with multilateral organizations equal to or above governments." Now, listen and think about that. Equal to or above governments. Private individuals and their private organizations have an impact equal to or above governments. Where have you heard that? Now, when some questions were addressed to the governments and the institutions at the start or during the pandemic, the response most often was, well, because WHO said and recommended so, and almost 200 governments in the world followed these COVID response recommendations from WHO, including on vaccination policy. Who in the world could doubt WHO and almost 200 governments in the world? Only a conspiracy theorist, I would say, and I am called the one number of times already. But what if WHO policy on COVID and vaccination has been captured by private commercial interests, corrupted by Mr. Bill Gates? I think this is what happened. If so, and I think this is proven already enough, but you can research yourself, then the whole COVID story suddenly turns upside down. It becomes a scientific fraud, which is written here, among other things, it's scientific fraud, and a crime of immense scale. If one adds the fact reported back in January 2015 by scientists that Bill Gates, with his foundation, funded gain-of-function experiments that potentially were related to the bioweapons research, the picture becomes even more interesting, confusing, and scary. One participates in creating the virus, then claims that this is a very dangerous virus, helps manufacture the remedy, vaccine, and its distribution and propaganda channels, and one is who? A hero? I think such a person, along with others, are criminals and crooks. In addition, give several million to major media outlets, in other words, corrupt them as well, spread your story, on COVID and you are in control of your business plan. What I do, I look for facts, analyze them. Sometimes it takes some effort and time, yes, and draw my own conclusions and present them to people. They are free to do the same. Look, analyze, conclude. This is what free minds are for. This is what democracy is about. We should stand for that, despite the fact that corrupt individuals like Bill Gates and Ursula von der Leyen tell us. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Stasys. Pfizer lied, people died. Governments lied, people died. Ursula von der Leyen lied, people died. This is what we learned in the past week, starting of October 10th, 2022. On that day, we found out on record that a representative of Pfizer acknowledged in the COVID committee in the European Parliament that they never tested their injections for stopping the transmission of the virus. The same information was confirmed 3 days after, on October 13th, 2022. A representative of the European Commission in the same COVID committee stated the following, and I quote, and his answer was after I asked him about the effectiveness of these injections. And he said the following: if you want to have a vaccine that prevents transmission, best of luck. We could have got it, but it is not there yet. There's work going on in this direction, but that is a completely different design of these vaccines, end quote. So this is the second confirmation from a governmental official that they haven't tested these injections for stopping the transmission of the virus. So everything that they've said in the past 2 years proved to be a huge lie. And because they lied, people died. Because in these 2 years, when maybe there could have been developed other kind of treatments of this virus, nobody paid attention to that. When scientists, when medical experts said that there are regular treatments to this virus, they were labeled as promoting disinformation and not trusting the science. Well, this is what the science just stated right now, that they haven't tested these medical products for stopping the transmission of the virus. The third thing that happened last week, on October 13th, we discussed in this COVID committee a report released by the European Court of Auditors. This is a public document. And I invite all the journalists and all the people to find it online and read it, because they will be shocked, but they will find in it. And one of the things that I found and pretty much shocked me is the following, and I quote: by November 2021, the Commission had signed 71 billion euros worth of contracts on behalf of member states to purchase up to 4.6 billion COVID-19 vaccine doses. We are 460 million people in the EU. Ursula von der Leyen signed purchasing contracts of 4.6 billion COVID-19 doses of vaccines. When I saw this figure, I thought that I'm not seeing clearly. I wear glasses, you know, I have to do this. I mean, are they serious? That means 10 doses of vaccines. She signed contracts to purchase for every human being in the European Union. So the question is, if these vaccines or injections were so effective, in other words, were providing immunity from getting infected and from transmitting the virus, why would she purchase or sign to purchase 10 doses of vaccines or injections? We cannot call that vaccines now, after what we just found out. She signed to purchase 10 doses of injections for every EU citizen. This is simply absurd. And the fourth thing that we found out is the ongoing investigation by the European Prosecutor's Office, which on October 14th released the following statement, and I quote: the EPPO confirms that it has an ongoing investigation into the acquisition of COVID-19 vaccines in the European Union. So, unfortunately, it took us 2 years to realize and to make these public officials and these companies to acknowledge something that all of us said by raising just logical questions. Logical questions. And unfortunately, and I have to say this, the worldwide media refuse to ask these logical questions. What are the studies, or what were the studies back then behind these vaccines? How long did they take to develop the vaccines? Are they stopping the transmission of the virus or not? We find out now, 2 years later, that they are not. This is a serious issue. And I hope that all these public officials who are still holding public offices will never ever be again elected by the people in any such office. And nevertheless, considering the fact that Ursula von der Leyen lied and people died, clearly she committed fraud, corruption, she's in a clear conflict of interest, she must immediately and unconditionally resign from the position as President of the European Commission. Thank you. If there are any questions, yes, please.
Anna Bandensky, I'm from Europe Diplomatic Magazine. I have a question, a number of questions, and I hope that I can profit from the situation that there are not so many present here in this room, mostly online. So my first question is there any mechanism for Ursula von der Leyen to be imposed resignation? Because that is, for me, the legal question, because I have an impression that there is no such mechanism to impose the resignation on her. And if not, do you think that public opinion is powerful enough to lead to such a solution? And then I have a question to Mr. Yakelunas. If you cooperate with American Senate in Washington, because there are a number of senators which were also investigating this situation with conflict of interest of American media and world media and Bill Gates and his fund, because he is distributing generously presents, as well presents to scientists who worldwide promoted. And I received information that 800 millions were distributed by Pfizer in presents to scientists who support their products. If it's true, can you comment on that?
Thank you. I would like to answer your first question. If there's a way to, a legal way, I would say, that we could follow in order for Ursula von der Leyen to resign. I have to tell you that we are in discussions right now to pursue such an avenue. But more important than that, it's important for the public and for the citizens of the European Union to realize what happened. Because the governments, the national governments, were also complicit or accomplices to this. Because they were the one who allowed Ursula von der Leyen to negotiate on their behalf. So the question is, were the national governments aware of the clauses that she negotiated on their behalf, yes or no? Because if it's yes, then the national governments have a problem. If it's no, then she has a bigger problem. So we will get to the bottom of this, but the most important thing is that for more and more people to realize what happened, that for 2 years, we witnessed the biggest disinformation campaign in the history of mankind. Even during the Cold War, when the West was fighting with USSR, nothing like this ever happened. Billions of people were forced or tricked to be vaccinated or injected with the medical product that we see now is not stopping the transmission of the virus. Then what was the purpose of all of these campaigns? These are logical questions that we are asking, and I have to say that more and more people are looking into it.
If I may follow up, have you powers, your committee, because you created a COVID committee, do you have legal powers to invite for an interview, open interview, Ursula von der Leyen?
The COVID-19 committee is not an inquiry committee. It's a special committee just to see what happened over or during the pandemic. But using, again, public pressures and the position that we have, we discussed with the chair of the committee. Even she acknowledged publicly in some messages on Twitter that she's looking into it, and one of the people that will be calling will be Ursula von der Leyen. If you have anything to add.
To add to that, I mean, if Ursula von der Leyen had any shred of decency left in her body, she would, in light of what the public found out about it now, about these contracts and these purchases of vaccines, she would just resign, because that is what decent elected government officials in Western democracy at least do. They take responsibility. When you screw up on a scale like that, yes, you do resign. But aside from that, I don't expect her to do that, and that just goes to show that democracy, has really been perverted to a point where it's almost natural now, or almost common, that public officials just screw the people over and do not even dream of taking responsibility for that. In terms of the COVID committee, as Christian said, we are just a special committee. So no, we do not have the authority to get anyone in there. That's why Mr. Bourla, CEO of Pfizer, just declined and said, no, I'm not going to come after all. So that's why we are pushing to set up a formal committee of inquiry, so that the people will have some means to actually compel people to appear before the committee and to have them answer questions. And I would really suggest that the chair, Kathleen van Bremt, I mean, she's been running the special COVID committee up until this point, more like to protect the ones we invite to question, to protect them from our questions. So we cannot continue doing this, and I really hope that she realizes that this might not have been the best way of handling this committee, because after all, she is an elected representative of the people, and she should be a chair actually representing the best interest of the people. Thank you.
May I add something too? I'd like to add that even if the COVID committee has not inquiry powers, just the fact of kindly inviting Ursula von der Leyen for a hearing, if it's followed by a refusal from her, this is a further demonstration of not transparency and of withdrawal from her responsibilities and her accountability. So that would be one more element to help us in promoting among our colleagues in the Parliament the possible action, the possible motion for withdrawing trust to the President of Commission, which is a legal possibility that we have. And so I think that step by step we can get to this target, to this goal. We just need to use all the tools that we have and see if Mrs. von der Leyen will prefer to be compelled to do what she has to do, or she will choose to do it earlier. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for the question. It's, of course, a valid question. And I would recommend or invite my colleagues in the COVID committee to consider inviting Mr. Bill Gates also to talk and answer these questions, because the questions are very, very important. Yes, I follow some information in the US. Media in the US, as you probably know, is quite polarized on many issues, including on COVID. So CNN is financed by Bill Gates as part of his campaign, so it doesn't cover many things, including the Bill Gates' role in this story. But we'll get in touch with the representatives or senators and see what they are doing, because, you know, if Bill Gates with his organizations is above the governments, as the US official quoted, then I don't know which jurisdiction should take care of what he's doing. Probably the cooperation among US and EU, lawmakers and other institutions, prosecutors or others, is a question here. Whether it would happen, I don't know, but we'll keep raising questions, we'll keep pushing, and I think it will come time when they all have to answer the questions of the people. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? Questions online? No? Thank you so much, and see you next time.